Jacksonville. The child was born that couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
The weekend was on September 14th, 2019, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth, as we normally are. Nonetheless, this is an interesting week. We always say that, but in fact this was. The Democrats had their third debate, sorry about that, I'm getting ahead of myself, in Houston, Texas, at the historic Southern Texas University, a historic African-American university there in Houston, Texas. There were 10 of them on the stage. And on Friday Java, we actually posted via the Washington Post a transcript of the debate. You can go and check out Friday Java, and that link is there, and look at the transcript at your leisure. One of the things that happened, as far as the polling, there was no movement. We'll have on the Monday morning quarterback on a Monday, if there is any polling ups or downs, did anyone get 1 or 2 points more than they had at the very beginning? Obviously, Joe Biden was in the middle. We'll have Uncle Carl here. He's, of course, writing as normally does in the Wall Street Journal. The title of his little polemic here, "The Only Democrats with a Chance." Anyway, we'll look at that little article and have some comments on it. Also, we will cover the funeral of the late president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe. His official funeral was today in Harare, or later today actually in Harare. It's actually going on now. And his importance to the nations of Africa, the African continent, Pan-Africanism. He was truly a revolutionary, fought in the bush, went to get a military training in the Democratic Republic of Korea, known as North Korea, under the direction of Kim Il-sung. He was the grandfather of the chair now of the Workers' Party there, Chairman Un, whom J.D. Trump, the president, met with 2 times, or was it 3 times? Anyway, they've had a number of meetings there, an international link, a link to the past, a link to the future. President Mugabe, of course, was deposed by a military coup. And what has happened since he's been deposed? Actually, things have deteriorated in terms of the economy. Evidently, some promises of financial aid, etc., from governments and the corporate sector had not materialized. There were all types of shortages, roving blackouts, problems with food, etc., across the gamut. But yet, some people still have, of course, grievances against the late president. They had the stadium there, and the Western media reporting that, well, it would hold 60,000 people. There were not 60,000 people there. Well, there were not 60,000 people there. That would be the case, but his legacy is in the history books, and people can read about it. The African continent, the nations that are now independent, and most are, Zimbabwe got their independence in 1980. It was in Rhodesia, and they had a European majority government there, and they were deposed militarily. Period. Of course, there were negotiations, but again, it was a military victory for the Revolutionary Party, and the Revolutionary Party is still there. And we'll have more on that particular one. Also, this weekend we'll have our Numbers Man presentation. And incidentally, a Numbers Man, it perhaps will sound chauvinistic. When we started the program, at that time, frequently people would call themselves a numbers man, and I did that. I guess we could be numbers person. We haven't changed that. Anyway, it's known as the Numbers Man show now, and it's not B.T. Barnum. Anyway, it does cover macroeconomics. We'll be talking about retail sales and some also about healthcare as we move along. Next week, the Fed, of course, will meet, and it will be more, quote-unquote, data-rich. The numbers come from the Census Bureau, and, of course, you can find us on the normal channels: iHeart, Spotify, Stitcher, Spreaker, Twitter, YouTube. And the audio version will enhance that in Q4 as we come upon Q4 here. We'll get enhanced and go more to the video world. That is in the plan for all of our channels. We used to be on live stream. We used to live stream our broadcast simultaneously when our late great Jerry Pippin was still around assisting us. We don't have Jerry now, but nonetheless, we'll get some of those. We'll make some improvements, including a new logo. So that's enough for the old business there, and we'll go to Uncle Carl Rove writing in the Wall Street Journal, the only Democrats with a chance. With fall coming on, it already feels as if only the former VP, Joe Biden, Senator Warren, and Bernie can win the Democratic nominee for president. So Uncle Carl is buying free, viable candidates scenario. Yes, scuds of other Democrats remain in the race, all saying they're in it to win, but with summer gone, no other candidate has made significant inroads. It's unlikely that any of these have a real chance to be nominated. This isn't the only option. Insiders reflect on reporting in major publications, cable news panels. It also reflected in the polls since March. 4 Democrats have scored more than 10% in the real clear politics average of national polls. The aforementioned trio and Senator Kamala Harris, California. Since early August, only Biden, Bernie, and Warren have. Biden has traded between, that's a word that a lot like to use, 26 and 32% in the average since July, and today sets right below 30. His lead is doable, but not commanding, and that is the takeaway there. He has a little margin for error since clocking in 8% in early June. Senator Warren has been rising, and at first it looked as if she was growing at Sanders' expense, but the Vermont Socialists was in at 17% and is at 18% today. It turns out Warren jumped to 18.7, has come at the expense of the rest of the field, especially Senator Harris, who faded from 15% in mid-July after the first debate to 7.2 now. Harris' first big post-introductory moment, her takedown of Biden in the first debate, was too cute. Lacking follow-up, she has hurt herself by vacillating on healthcare and other issues with self-serving and evasive answers. So says Uncle Carl. While the press treats Warren as the next big thing, most ignore Bernie. It's important to remember that in 27 national polls since the 1st of August, Bernie led Warren in 17. Warren is ahead of Sanders in the RCP only because her leads in 9 polls was larger than his leads in nearly twice as many surveys. Lots of the seemingly talented candidates blew their introductions, and the do-overs are hard. The debates have shown that it's difficult to break through on a crowded stage, no doubt about that. That is why these corporate-sponsored debates have a crowded stage. And for anyone other than Mr. Biden and Sanders, and he refers to her, Uncle Carl, as Ms. Warren to win, it will now take an extraordinary combination of events, the total collapse of the top-tier candidate, coupled with the reboot of the back of the pack candidates who grabbed the hearts of the Democrats in a manner of Robert Kennedy in 1968. Ted Kennedy's challenge to Jimmy Carter in 80. It's hard to imagine that happening. Well, the one candidate could do something of that sort is Beto O'Rourke of El Paso, Texas. The top 3 candidates today command support of roughly 2/3 of the Democrats, leaving a third for the remaining 17 to split up. If that remains the case when the first ballots are cast, it's unlikely that any lesser candidate would get 50% of the vote needed in any state to win delegates. Now, this is under the Democratic rules. The 2 exceptions are if they pull off a stunning upset in Iowa and or New Hampshire, or their home states vote early. Talking to you, Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar, potential kingmakers. Well, Beto O'Rourke could pull off Texas, has a very good chance of doing that. Beto and Bernie are running well there. And Liz Warren. Theoretically, there's still time for the basic dynamic of the race to change. Iowa is more than 4 months away, but this Democratic contest started earnestly early and ramped up fast than previous ones. That's not a good sign there. But it was designed by the corporate interests to do just that. That's how the debate set up, and the Democratic Party set their rules up, period. The new rules also have an impact. Candidates have spent precious times and money expanding donor files, performing well in a handful of state polls to meet the thresholds to get on the debate stage. Well, you get on the debate stage with 20 people, what have you accomplished? Very, very little. Those effects drew them away from building strong local organizations and focusing on compelling messages. Well, this is a little bit different. Some people, some of the candidates built very strong organizations. Bernie, he's well known in Iowa, having a campaign there before, and actually won the Iowa primary in 2016. Elizabeth Warren invested very heavily in organizing, grassroots organizing in Iowa. And the same in New Hampshire. Of course, Bernie is also known in New Hampshire. So these candidates got going very, very early. Then you go to Nevada. Nevada is a state. Harry Reid is still the kingpin there, even in his retirement. And Bernie is known there and has an organization there, and so does Elizabeth Warren. And of course, Joe Biden as normal, has the local Democrats, many of the office holders there. I don't know where Harry Reid stands on that particular situation, but that could be also in Iowa and New Hampshire. But in Iowa and New Hampshire, these two states, can the local politicos pull it off for Joe Lunchbox Biden? We'll see, but probably not. So he's dampened it down, thinking, well, in Iowa, if he can come in second or third, he can leave Iowa in one piece and move on to New Hampshire. And again, it's basically the same scenario. Second or third. Again, Elizabeth Warren is from the Commonwealth next door. Bernie is from Vermont. That's all New England in a playing field. And historically, candidates from New England have done better in New Hampshire. So thus, it puts Biden in a second, third, or fourth place. That would really depend on where he ends up. Then he goes to Nevada. Now, the trade unions are there, a lot of Latino votes, etc. in Nevada. How does he do in Nevada? That is a big gauge right there. And then it's on to South Carolina. The party there is basically composed of the followers of O.J. Simpson. In other words, African Americans. Biden will do better there. And Bernie in some of the polls is running in second place and third place in South Carolina. And then you inch closer to a Super Tuesday, a lot of states there. That will depend on the financial viability of these candidates. And you'll be picking and choosing. Kamala Harris, California, very, very large state there, a lot of delegates there. She will get more than 15%, so she'll get votes out of California. And some of the larger states, there's no doubt about that particular situation. And then the rest of the calendar, we'll see more and more of that coming along. So that's how the field is shaping up at this point in time. Another item is the House Judiciary Committee has voted preliminary investigation topics for a perhaps impeachment indictment. Now, a little word about the so-called impeachment situations. They've laid it out and how they will have hearings. Some of the hearings will be closed-door hearings. Al Green of Houston, Texas, has been introducing articles of impeachment for a very, very long time, and so have others. But the problem is still the majority of the Democrats in the House have not signed on. And you will need a majority of the Democrats in the House to get the articles of impeachment voted, period. And if in the event there are an impeachment, the House does impeach, it goes to the Senate. But the political problem in the Senate is, as long as the Republicans stick with DJ Trump, there's not a problem. But the cost there could be dynamic in a polarized situation. The Republicans learned that in the impeachment proceeding against William Jefferson Clinton. Clinton survived in the Senate, and not only did survive, he won re-election handily, and his approval ratings went up. Republicans lost House seats and I believe some Senate seats. Now, this is the problem that the Democrats in some of those purple, they call them purple districts, like Abigail Spangenberger has in Virginia. Democrats there, after an impeachment failure, would be vulnerable. So what happens? This is one of the things you always have to think about as a strategist. If you end up losing the House, you lost the House. And if you end up losing Senate seats you could have gotten because of DJ Trump's motivated base, and some of these so-called independent types fall in there and resent the impeachment process, you're in trouble in the Congress. And then that opens you up to a situation in the election if you have these supporters, particularly independents, that otherwise would have voted, not voted, or would have voted for some Democrat and not DJ Trump, if they feel upset by the whole process and for whatever reason, and DJ Trump creeps back into office, you've got big problems. because old DJ is going to be doing victory laps for another 4 years on Twitter, and he is going to point out the people, the deep, dark state that was against him. And not only that, that sets up the Supreme Court. Chances are in the next 4 years, and perhaps even in 2020, some member of the court will die, or some member of the court will become ill and leave the court, and they'll appoint another conservative judge. Well, what does this mean? Well, basically it means they still have the Senate in 2020. They could appoint a conservative, nominate a conservative, and confirm this conservative. And then you have Roe v. Wade, could be modified or just totally abolished. And various other social type issues could be under the microscope. And then you would have conservative groups continually attacking trade unions, and DJ Trump at the same time restricting the federal trade unions more and more. And then trade unions would increasingly be on the fire. And what this points to is you have a lot of people that are there, but they need to think about what's going on. How does this affect the progressive community? We only have a limited number of money. It's not finite. Thus, you pick the battles that you can fight. The environment. A more conservative Supreme Court would mean many of the environmental regulations that DJ Trump has put in the trash can would fall. The litigatory strategy that's now holding some things that would fall. Immigration would be what they want it to be. There are a lot of variables here that you have to play in. We model these things at Cranston Analytics. We look at what's going on and how they will affect things. We don't say that this necessarily would happen, but the problem is, we do the crystal ball here. That's Larry Sabato's people, and how these elections actually turn out, where we'll be with Medicare for all and with health care, period. So those are some questions out there. And the big problem is some of these people that are pushing impeachment now because they don't like DJ Trump is the wrong thing to do. It's not DJ Trump. It's the Republican Party who is supporting the present capitalist system in this industrialized country. That is your problem. Do not focus on one person. DJ Trump is not the bad person here. It is capitalism. And remember that. Now to Jamaica. Jamaica is facing, at the last report I saw, another tropical storm named Huberto. And that will add insult to injury, as we say in the States. And there are other ones that are coming along. Now, the problem in Jamaica is infrastructure. They never really had infrastructure. They had a separation with income inequality there that has went on. Governments have not aggressively addressed it. So thus now they are starting over. Some Jamaicans are trying to get entry visas into the U.S. Some if they have papers, because many of the papers have been washed away, quite literally. And DJ Trump says, well, there's some really, really bad people here, so they're going to restrict people. Well, no doubt about that. So people now that are still alive, are housed in temporary shelters. Some are moved on, say, to Nassau or other places, living with relatives, living on boats, living wherever they can live. Some have with the financial means or whatever, have gotten out, that have their identity papers on them. In these storms, that's the first thing that you grab is some sort of identification and tape it to you. That's about the only way you can do it. One lady left her passport and various other things in a safe. Some thieves stole the safe, so they now have the identity papers. I think she was able to get evacuated because of humanitarian reasons. That is where Jamaica is. Let us move on here, away from this part of the presentation. I think we're going now. Edward Snowden gave an interview. We'll have a special program on Ed Snowden to NPR, and we'll go to NPR and look at Ed Snowden and his valuable impact to the U.S. in terms of the rights of citizens. And I'll just highlight this just very briefly here. Ed Snowden tells NPR the executive branch of sort of hacked the Constitution. And this was on the 12th. Scott Simon evidently was the person that interviewed him. We'll have that interview via NPR, and it'll be one of our special programs coming up here. And we'll have that as we move on. I am not... This is from the New York Times. I think this is... Rips emerges, Democrats joust, fiery debate. This was the headline in the New York Times. Basically... what happened here on health care. This is by one of our favorite, she's the White House correspondent now, Maggie Herberman. She used to be at one time, I believe she was over at Politico, and now she's with the Times, moving up in the scheme of things. I wanted to say that she Iowa. Anyway, nonetheless, she is there, and we can find a date here. We'll get back to her column. Our reporters provide real-time analysis. Biden and rivals spiral immigration and health care. And debate seemed feistier than others. Well, it had to be feistier because this is the third debate where points made. We'll have that on the Monday morning quarterback. We'll look a little bit more at this. And various other Gail Collins here will... with Biden's bloop, will Beto beep, and it's debate time. Well, again, this is basically what is going on there. So let's move along a little bit here. Well, let's grab a little story. Grand jury indicts Baker Hughes. They are people that drill oil wells, and they're now part of GE, for exposing workers. This is from Reuters. To toxic chemicals. Excuse me. This is on the 12th. Grand jury, this is out in Alaska, indicted GE's Baker Hughes, two of its subsidiaries, and employees for 25 felony charges. You heard it here, of assault relating to toxic chemicals released at a construction site. As here, the indictment charges Baker Hughes, John Seiden Willis, identified as the manager of the oil field service company. The 25 charges stem from chemicals released in 2014 during the building of a chemical transfer facility in Kermie, Alaska. I think Kimmy, Alaska. According to a statement from the Alaska Attorney General, construction crews at the facility were reportedly exposed to toxic chemicals, the statement said. But Baker Hughes, two of its subsidiaries, and Willis have failed to respond to workers' complaints until several were taken to hospital. A large exposure event. 5 crew members experienced prolonged serious injury, including a memory loss, ataxia, migraines, vertigo, respiratory issues. Oh boy. Willis was not immediately available. I imagine he was not. Baker Hughes says commitment to safety and that of its operators, and that is operates oilfield service facility in Kimmy. In compliance with the law, we vigorously deny the claims. The company and Willis have been indicted on 10 counts of first-degree assault, 10 counts of second-degree assault, and 5 counts of third-degree assault. If convicted, Baker Hughes and its units could face fines totaling only $2.5 million. Willis, of course, faces 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine if convicted on the most serious allegations. To Mexico here, and this is one of the stories here. The Mexican government protested, and Central American immigrants fear deportations back to violent countries. This again is from Reuters. To their violent homelands on Thursday, the Supreme Court placed a stay on a district court's The court found that the Trump's restrictive asylum rules could go into effect nationwide. This is a nationwide injunction that had been handed out, Chelsea, underlining legal proceeds, handling the president of victory in his anti-immigration credentials for 2020. The law requires immigrants who want asylum to first seek safe haven in a third country. Lots has been talked about that on their way to the U.S. Trump's immigration crackdown has animated his base of supporters, while immigration advocates in the U.S. Fear the court's decision will endanger the lives of migrants, many of them fleeing from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, with the threat of automatic rejection hanging over the most recent arrivals. Thousands of immigrants are camped in shelters and sleeping on the streets in the border town Mexico. One asylum seeker from El Salvador, a shelter in Tijuana, while waiting for immigration hearing in San Diego, said she only hoped to God she would not be sent back. I'm very scared there, no doubt. That was Veronica Martinez. She's 23 years old. The Mexican government also has pushed back, one that could create a new headache for Mexico. This is a ruling by the court. It's a U.S. issue, and obviously we don't agree with it. That was from the Mexican foreign minister, Marcelo Imbere. Anyway, the court's decision comes at a delicate time, no doubt, in the relations here. Mexico has resisted U.S. pressure to sign what is called a safe third country agreement, Yeah, that is third world too. There is one, incidentally, with Canada. Under the so-called migration protection protocols, the U.S. government built temporary soft side courthouses near the borders in Laredo, Brownsville, Texas, and started hearings this week. And in Harrington, Texas, Judge Delino Gomez took the bench, linked to by video conference to a courtroom 30 miles away. That's 50 kilometers. In Brownsville, she heard cases of two Salvadorans who crossed the Mexican border who crossed from Mexico into South Texas in August and were arrested there. A Salvadoran woman said she had received cruel threats from gangs, and this is most of them there, and this is where the hearing is. But now this is one comment here. It is a stay by the Supreme Court, and usually when stays are granted, can move on to injunctive relief, which says basically that defendant will succeed at trial. There's no guarantee here that the defendant will, in fact, succeed at trial. I'm looking at my calendar here. All right, so we'll move along here a little bit. We'll go ahead and do this one. This is from CNBC. Would a Medicare for All plan help you save money on your family's health care costs? It is complicated. This is by Megan Lee Hart. Anyway, the current healthcare system is failing too many Americans. A struggling number of people are being forced into bankruptcy over their medical bills, and perhaps worse, avoiding treatment in order to stay afloat financially. Healthcare expenses have become so burdensome that there is a $250,000 medical campaign listed on GoFundMe each year, raising about $650 million for families. The nation is reaching a breaking point as a result of the 2020 presidential campaign. Candidates are starting to weave their proposals together. In their stump speeches of the 10 Democratic candidates involved Thursday, 6 have released detailed proposals. But most Americans don't understand how these proposals will work. A June Kaiser Foundation poll found that 67% of Americans believe they would still pay deductibles and co-pays, even though Medicare for All plans eliminate those out-of-pocket costs. And this is very important there. And moreover, half of those who have workplace insurance believe that they would be able to keep their coverage, even though Medicare for All plans would set up a new national healthcare system and eliminate the need for these so-called private insurers. But that doesn't mean you could not still have them. Let's get that straight. The current Medicaid system is a federal health insurance system serving more than 60 million Americans over the age of 65, including the speaker here, as well as those with qualifying long-term disabilities who apply at a younger age. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Medicare costs are broken down into a series of plans known as Part A through D. Most on Medicare don't pay for Part A, which is the hospital insurance there. But if you do spend time in the hospital, now this is important to remember this. There is a $1,340 deductible. If you're in the hospital for more than 2 months, you will need to pay $341 per day, and beyond 90 days that jumps to $682. That's according to Medicare. Now Part B, this is the medical services including outpatient care, preventive businesses, ambulatory assistance, healthcare equipment. Currently standard premiums are $135.40 a month, or higher depending on your income. Parts A and B are referred to as original Medicare. Virtually all senior citizens have this coverage, but you also opt for Part C, known as Medicare Advantage, which is a supplemental coverage for expenses not including A and B. Another big cost for Medicare is Part D, the prescription drug. We have one of those plans, which vary. The average premium is about $33 a month, although some plans can charge deductibles of over $400 a year. We do have deductibles. According to, again, the Kaiser Foundation, the average Medicare beneficiary paid $5,503. Those costs include monthly premiums as well as services, long care, term, eyeglasses, which are not included under the other, and contact lenses, hearing aids, dental work. Those are not covered by Medicare. Premiums alone have gone up $105 a month in 2013 to $135 in 2019. That's for the standard program there. And participants in Good Health and Part A and B alone pay $7,620. That is the out-of-pocket money here. So if Americans are spending thousands on while Medicaid, then what damage for those with traditional employer-based insurance? It depends on a variety of factors, including where you live, the size of your employer, the level of your health. Looking broader, the average American family of 4 with medical insurance spends $7,726 on health care last year. That is roughly $4,706 on premiums and $3,020 on out-of-the-pocket money. So in other words, there you go. On individual levels, however, the costs are actually less. An average healthy American with insurance making $50,000 a year is paying $2,200, basically $20 in premiums and out-of-pocket costs. Over half of Americans, 29%, say they pay over $500 out of pocket. Of course, that was in 2018, while 5% say they pay over $1,000. Currently, about 92% of Americans have some form of health insurance, with 55% of those with insurance of an employee-based plan. That's according to the Census Bureau. Yet the number of Americans with health insurance dropped for the first time last year, due in part to the political effects to weaken the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. Yet experts agree that wages are not keeping pace with a rising cost of health care. There's growing evidence that the costs of protections have eroded for those who have employer-sponsored health care. That's according to David Blumenthal, president of Healthcare Policy Foundation at the Commonwealth Fund. Those healthcare costs can skyrocket, when faced with unexpected and persistent problems. 1 in 6 Americans say they have a surprise medical bill, depending on their insurance. Average out-of-the-pocket cost for an unexpected out-of-network emergency visit was at $628. I know a professor that happened to him. And while those were admitted, paid an average of $2,040. That's according to a study by the JAMA, Internal Medicine Journal. Research from the New York Times, Commonwealth Fund, etc., that nearly a third of those who are routinely sick, even though they have medical insurance, spend all of their savings. In fact, another survey here, and we'll have more of this on Numbers Man. On the surface, the average person currently spends less on out-of-pocket costs when using a private-based insurance than with Medicare. There are a lot of other factors not captured in the data. Medicare currently serves a predominantly elderly population who typically require more health care costs. Those suffering from chronic disease, severe illnesses are perhaps better compared in the New York Times survey here. 11% of those who are seriously ill report spending $50,000 annually on their health insurance and prescriptions. Of those individuals, a Medicare for All plan may help them save tens of thousands of dollars. Adding to the challenge of deciding which system would serve Americans better is the fact that the Democrats of Medicare for All can come in various varieties. Its most ambitious type would replace all current public and private forms of Medicare. As a result, the program would not resemble the Medicare system as it stands today. Beyond the uncertainty around it, and this is a 4-year process at best, and maybe a 10-year process. At the very least, such an expensive national program would likely increase many Americans' direct health care costs. Currently, the average American making $50,000 with medical insurance already pays $3,050 towards state and federal taxes. Medicare for All will require a major change in the way in which healthcare coverage and care is organized and financed here. That's according to Tricia Newman at the Kaiser Health Foundation. Medicare says in testimony for Congress, the major change be exactly what's needed to solve the financial burdens for many Americans who need, according to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, both candidates indicate their support. The goal of these companies, she says, is to bring as many dollars as they can in premiums and pay out as few dollars as possible, no doubt about that. And this is the end of the article from Megan Lehart. She's a senior money writer at Meckett, and this is on CNBC's site. I think we'll append this, and the reason we shall do it is because of the important information it has here for all people, period. Now, we've been looking at data because we are data driven. We have the Census Bureau's publications, calendar year coverage in 2018, so forth and so on. We'll have some of this on Numbers Man. We don't have it now as we move along here. Let's move past this article and see if we can get our scoreboard up here. We've been having all kinds of machinations with the scoreboard lately from ESPN, but we'll try again to get it up. And let's pause a minute. This is WBRN radio here, and we're going to take a station. These scores are from a Friday night, which have been Friday the 13th scores. The Cubbies in the Laffer in Wrigley Field 13-8 over Pittsburgh. The line scores here. The Cubbies had 16 hits and 3 errors, and the Pirates 13 hits. Atlanta was in D.C. Atlanta 5-0 over the Nationals. The Nationals had just had some winning games in Minnesota. And in 12, the Yankees were beaten in Toronto by the Blue Jays 6-5. The Blue Jays had 13 hits, 1 error. The Yankees 9 hits and 2 errors. Period. The Orioles were in Detroit. 6-2 was the score over the hapless Tigers. The Dodgers were in New York on the other coast. The Dodgers 9-2. The line score that the Dodgers had 11 hits. And the Mets 5. Mr. Kershaw evidently was the pitcher that Dodgers catch Sodergaard on a bad day. Definitely so there. Anyway, that's the story. The Athletics win another game, this time in Texas, 14-6. Davis hit his second home run. The A's top the Rangers there and keep a wild card lead. So the Athletics in the wild card race in Kansas City. The Astros beat the Royals 4-1. Cole wins his 17th. And the Cardinals were victorious in St. Louis over the Brewers, shut the Brewers out 10-0. Paul Goldschmidt hit a grand slam home run and a free run homer to back Mr. Wainwright. I'll get him right in a minute here. Adam Wainwright, he's a pitcher. And the Rockies win one over the Padres, 10-8. Denver. Nolan Arrieta hit his 40th home run. And Trevor Story connected twice to lead Colorado. The Reds are 4-3 over the D-backs in Arizona. And had Joey Van Meter, Josh homered for the Red. And Luis Castillo pitched 5 solid innings. I guess the Reds needed that. And the Rays and Angels in California, it was the Rays 11-4. The White Sox in Seattle 9-7 over Seattle. And the Marlins on the West Coast in the Bay, Giants won. Marlins Zippo. Buster Posey drove in the game's only run. Buster's still around. And the Twins were in Cleveland, but the rain rained them out. They're playing a doubleheader later today. That is that. And I don't know if we can get the standings up here or not. The LA team, the Dodgers, have clinched the West in the National League. And the Central in the AL is up for grabs between Minnesota and them. And yeah, we do have it up here. The Yankees are playing a 6:55 ball, and Tampa Bay is 9 games behind. Our Red Sox are 19 games behind, and oh boy, Toronto is 38 games, and the Orioles, we're so far down there I can't look up, 48 behind. In the Central of the American League, the Twins are on top. Cleveland is 3.5 games back. The White Sox 24.5. We didn't talk about them. Houston's on top in the West of the American League. They are playing 6:44 ball. And the Oakland A's in their wild card chase are 7.5 games behind. In the National League East, Atlanta's on top, and then come the Nationals 9.5 behind. In the Central, surprisingly, the Cardinals are back on top. The Cubbies are 4 games behind. This is still a race. And the Brewers are 5 back. And Cincy is 14.5, and Pittsburgh is 18.5. They'll never get caught up. LA has clinched. They are playing 6:44 ball, and behind them, 20.5 games, is the D-backs, and the Giants at 24.5. The Padres at 27, and the poor Rockies at 32.5. Oh, one has to catch his breath after all of that. Anyway, this will do it for the week that was on the 14th of December, 2019. This is Boston Red and the Jared Pepper Memorial Broadcast Booth. We'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback on the political side of WBRN and the Boston Red Network. Special programming, the funeral of Robert Mugabe, and also Edward Snowden, courtesy of NPR. The interview then, some commentary on Edward Snowden and Ed Snowden and his work for the American people on privacy. And we might put some of that also on the Open Source Network, because our open source program, because again, privacy is a very important part of that. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you on Monday morning on this broadcast. And as Paul Harvey used to say, good day.